Hello, everyone. This is Dave Warner with Small Town Life, part of the Studio 25 podcast network, and we've got another returning guest. I've done this a couple of shows here the last week or so. We've got Scott Flansburg in the studio, Herkimer Originals basketball. Even though it's hot as hell out there right now, we're going to talk basketball, right?
Yes.
Scott, a little refresher on who you are.
Yeah, I'm born and raised Herkimer kid. Went in the Air Force for 6 years, and then I started this thing called the Human Calculator, and that took me around the world for about 30-some years, and it was a blast. Every day was a dream, visiting schools, getting kids excited about math, doing fun stuff. And COVID hit, and I decided to start the Herkimer 9 and see if we could prove basketball was invented in Herkimer. So that's consumed my being for the past 5 years.
How come you didn't stay in the Air Force? A lot of people go in, they stay 6 years. Usually it's like a 4-year enlistment. You went 6. I went 21,
It wasn't for me.
Okay.
I did 4 years in Japan. I got married. I had, met a great girl and got to travel. But the lifestyle wasn't for me. The control, the limitation.
You don't like that control, huh?
It freaked me out a little bit, and as you get a little older, you start to realize, wow, I'm working for somebody else all the time,
Yeah.
And so I decided to get out and start doing this. I was actually asked to visit a school when I was in the Air Force for my supervisor's kid. And after the show, the school called me back and said, hey, we want you to come in and do some more shows for other classes. And I just started doing that, and I was like, wow, I got a gift. I'm really good at this. The kids love it. Why wouldn't I try to do that?
Talk about what that gift is just for a second, because I know everybody asks you the human calculator. What does that mean? But What does that mean?
Yeah, I just have a gift for numbers. I've been in the Guinness Book of World Records now for over 20 years, and they gave me 15 seconds to race a calculator. So the judge picks a random number, and I have to add that number to itself over and over again as fast as I can. So, if I asked you to count by 5, you're going to say 5, 10, 15, 20.
Right.
They're going to ask me to count by 87. So I got to do 174, 261, 348, 435. So I've had that world record for over 20 years. And I just have I see numbers differently. And so, I have a best-selling book called Math Magic. And I show people the most efficient way to get the answer to a math problem if you can only use your brain. You don't have pencil, you don't have paper, you don't have a calculator. What is the most efficient way to get that answer? Just using your brain. Mm. And that's the book that I wrote.
It is interesting because 5, like you use, is an easy one to continue through. You get 100, 105, 110. It's repetitive, right?
Yeah.
Is it repetitive when it comes to somebody saying, give me 83 to...
No, 83 is a good pick. It's a prime number. So it doesn't have any divisors. There's no patterns to it. You're crunching the numbers, but right. 166, 249, 332, 415, 498, 581, 64. I can just tune into that number. And
it's almost, I'm looking into your eyes, and it's like the Matrix.
It feels like it, and it goes so fast that my brain is going so fast that even myself, I'm like, geez, am I guessing? I'm flying right here, So
do you ever check your work in the end?
I can feel it. If I said a wrong number, I would stop myself. I'd be, oh, wait a minute, that didn't feel right. I'm tuned into numbers, not just up here. This is area 44. This is where you crunch numbers. It's called the Broman area. And my area is about 4 times the size of a normal person, is what the Stanley Superhumans folks said. So I believe I found a way to exercise this muscle, and most of us don't. We do math through memory and techniques that aren't really logical. Mine is all logical. So I think I just kept building that foundation of number sense.
Yeah. You have a lot of years where you have been practicing it, but I can't even 83 plus 83, I'd be sitting there going, okay, 8 to 16, 336.
It's funny. When I first started hanging out with Alice Cooper and I'd gotten in the Guinness book, he goes, we were just messing around at golf one day, and he goes, you know what, Scott, I realized is I couldn't even fake your world record. If I was asked to count by 83, and I didn't have to be right. I just came up with any random numbers. He was 167, 549, 4. You know, like you get so discombobulated, he couldn't even pretend he was doing it.
You can add like 100 and offset a couple numbers every once in a while and just kind of,
Go ahead and try. Count by 83.
No, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to look like a fool on my own show, right?
Right. So,
because I'm already having trouble thinking of it. Like, I think I concentrate too much on it or something. You've got some kind of I don't know. System's the wrong word.
Well, and when I did the Guinness World Record thing, it's funny. I didn't know I could do this when this happened, but I beat the computer. I beat the calculator, the accountant running the calculator, and they went to check my answers. And we went to a commercial break, and when the judge came over, he said, you know, we don't think you're calculating. We think you've memorized all these answers.
Oh my God.
I said, so you're saying you pick a random number and you say it out loud and I just start counting by it and I can recall all those answers as fast as I can talk? And he goes, yeah, that seems more realistic than you crunching those numbers. And I said, wow, I don't even know what to say, man. I'm doing a lot of math right here. And he goes, well, can you prove to us that you haven't memorized all these answers? And I had never been challenged in that way. And it took us a minute, but we came up with this. When you ask me to count by a number like 83, everybody starts at 0. If I ask you to count by 5, you're starting at 0. So you're going to say 5, 10, 15, 20. So maybe I could have memorized every number starting at 0, right? But what if you want me to count by 83, but instead of starting at 0, just pick a random starting number like 315.
And add 83.
And now add 83, 83. Now, there's no way I could have memorized that, right?
Infinite number.
So pick a 3-digit number and a 2-digit number, and I'll
727.
And I'll count by a 2-digit number starting at 727. What do you want me to count by?
27.
That's too close, too simple. So 727.
Okay, yeah, all right. I should have been. 14.
727 plus 14, 741, 755, 769, 783, 797, 811, 825. So, you know, there's no way I could have memorized that.
No.
You know, I'm crunching those numbers. So that helped me even dive deeper into understanding my potential or what I could do that I didn't even realize I could do.
The Air Force. Hell, the Air Force.
Yeah, well, it was fun. You know, I got to learn Japanese and live in Japan for 4 years and meet my wife, or, you know, now ex-wife. But, you know.
That happens.
Right. Statistically,
she couldn't keep up with the numbers, right?
No, she wanted me to stay in the Air Force, and I wanted to get out. So that was part of the contention.
Yeah.
But so that's how I got to Herkimer was I would come back here a week a year. And for the Cuyahoga Valley Foundation Golf Tournament, it's like a high school reunion for me and a great golf tournament with all my friends from childhood and family and friends. And that was it. I wouldn't spend 5 minutes on Main Street, Herkimer, Dave. I might drive down there, didn't even notice, didn't even look at anything, didn't care. You know, it was just my old Main Street.
Yeah. I know that feeling. I mean, I don't go back to my old hometown. I don't even go back once a year or so.
Well, and so that's that measuring stick, though. Of all of a sudden, where my sister Kathy got on the town board, and all of a sudden all these issues were front and center to her, and I would hear about them when we're sitting there at dinner with her and her husband Bill, and I'd just be like, holy cow, never even thought there was really a lot of problems in Herkimer. She goes, well, wait till you get to the village. And, you know, that she was the town. I had no idea what I was
town is kind of around, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The village is part of the town, but the town, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They got to fix that.
Somebody's got to fix it.
Yes.
Yeah. So you came back during COVID. What got you interested in even going to the Historical Society?
Just my dad. You know, he was in his last days and staying at the Fultz home. They were taking care of him there. And when they gave him medicine, he would get knocked out for a few hours or be really tired and stuff. So I just wanted to give him a little space. And I just was walking down Main Street and saw the Historical Society, walked in, and I asked Ted Adams, the 89,000-year-old volunteer there. Love Ted.
89,000 years old.
He's been there forever.
Divide that number. When was he born?
Yeah, right. Tuesday. And I said, hey, tell me something about my hometown that would blow me away. And he didn't even hesitate. He goes, well, you know, basketball was invented here in Herkimer. And I just started laughing. I said, well, I grew up here. I never heard about that.
Yeah.
I highly doubt that. And he hands me Frank J. Basilow's book. I grew up with basketball, and says, here, just read this. And it's a pretty fast read, couple hours.
And a plug for them, what new edition coming out, right?
Well, for the Naismith book.
For the Naismith book.
Our
book.
book.
All right.
Yep.
Yeah, not Baslow's.
Right.
Sorry.
Baslow's book was published in 1952.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been a while. And they republished it through Nebraska Press a few years back. But I read that book in an afternoon. And I sat down and I said to my dad, I go, what is this about? And he goes, yeah, I heard about that when I was a kid, but nobody really ever talks about it or brings it up.
What do you think that is? It's like a huge thing, don't you think?
I thought about this, Dave. Here's what I think happened. I'm in contact with the Baslow family, the Lambert-Will family, all these folks historically, right? And Frank J. Baslow and Lambert-Will went to Springfield in 1956 to fight for the location of the Basketball Hall of Fame. They took evidence and anything they could bring. And it turned out to be a committee of people from Springfield, not even historians. They were more like business people that were going to open the Hall of Fame and make money.
Where do we want to have this?
Yeah. So there was no chance.
Springfield, yeah.
And so they fought it. They took, and Herkimer didn't have the money, didn't have a location for the Hall of Fame, and didn't have 60 years of basketball coaches saying Springfield over and over again. So they were up against everything. And I think when they came back home to Herkimer in 1956 from Springfield, those two guys were the energy. And if they couldn't get it across the finish line, I don't think their family members thought they could do much better.
So everybody just let it die.
Yeah. And when I met the Baslow family, we actually had a very long Zoom, almost 2 hours, I think, with all their family members that wanted to join. There was probably 30 family members that were intrigued that we were going to try to revive this story. And I learned a lot in that phone call, but I also saw that the approach they took since Frank J. Baslow passed away and Lambert-Will passed away was passive. They were just sort of hoping, and
you didn't have a champion.
Well, and I really, I've lived out in Phoenix for the last 30 years, so I'm friends with people that own the NBA teams and run the NBA and players and Hall of Fame people. And, I know all these folks. And I was just like, holy cow, if, I can get this straightened down in 5 minutes. I just got to go back to Phoenix and meet with these folks and say, hey, guess what?
Been a long 5 minutes, hasn't it?
5 years. It's turned into 5 years. So I still remember saying that to myself. I mean, I said it at our very first board meeting. I said, this shouldn't be that hard, I think I know the right people. And we should be able to get this in front of them very quickly. And it took years because of the, what's that? What would be a good word? Contentious nature of the Hall of Fame and this story behind it.
Yeah. Well, you don't want to give something up, or you don't want to admit that you made a mistake, or that history is not actually as you state it, right?
Well, here's the difference, Dave. We have Cooperstown 28 miles away from Herkimer on Route 28. Okay, 28 miles on Route 28 to the Hall of Fame.
It's a number I can remember, Scott. Keep it easy for me, right?
And Cooperstown, when you walk into the Hall of Fame, the first thing you see now, in a dark corner off to the right, is a display showing a letter and a glove and a ball that was used in the 1800s and early 1900s to convince people that baseball was invented in Cooperstown by a kid named Abner Doubleday. That story has been debunked. Historians have debunked that. Doubleday wasn't even in Cooperstown when this happened. And so there's a disclaimer at the front of the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, and I believe it went up in the early 2000s, where they had to proclaim that Doubleday had nothing to do with the invention of baseball and that it didn't happen in Cooperstown.
You're killing me, because I actually didn't know that.
A lot of people don't know that, but now that has set a precedent for what we're trying to do in Springfield. If our evidence is correct, then Springfield Hall of Fame might have to go through a similar process to set the record straight.
Or at least acknowledge that there's possibly another path.
Yeah, and not to get into too many details, Dave, but it's if our evidence is right, there's some negative connotations to the Naismith family, to the Springfield Hall of Fame, and so on. So this isn't a win-win. Cooperstown was different. There was nobody fighting them for where baseball started, and there was no other inventor singled out. It was a game called Rounders over in London. That's how it started. So basketball's different. Everybody thought it was Naismith all in.
Right.
And now we know that that's probably not the case.
So you came back, COVID. You're at the library during visiting with your dad. What'd you find there?
That was what was weird, Dave, is that I read the book and I really, my first thought was, well, I could just disprove this. Yeah, I'm going to go spend an afternoon at the Historical Society and pull out some old newspapers and show that this story does not add up. And I just kept finding more evidence to collaborate the Baslow timeline, the Lambert-Wilt timeline, the Herkimer 9 timeline. And then in our research, I remember this day pretty wild. It was a wild day.
This is the epiphany moment?
One of them, because, I'm not kidding you. There was probably half a dozen times where we found something and we were all just like, well, that's it. That shuts down the rest of the story, But I looked at the 13 rules, the original 13 rules of basketball. And for some reason, I noticed a blemish on the document. And it looked like somebody had changed the date on the document. And I'm thinking, who would tamper with the 10 commandments of basketball? Who would put ink or eraser to this document that supposedly was on the wall 133 years ago on the first day of basketball? And sure enough, that date was changed. That blemish was true. And when you start to ask who did it and why they did it, when they did it, how they did it, there's no clear answer. And there are several versions based upon interviews through the decades. And so once we zeroed in on that, we started finding all these inaccuracies with the Naismith story and the Naismith timeline. So that's where we got lucky. We kept working on the Herkimer local evidence to prove something happened in Herkimer. But then we also started focusing on Naismith's story and how it kept changing through time, almost in a way to defend something else coming out. And so that's how that trail started.
Is there anything you're lacking from an evidence standpoint now to close the door?
It's funny. When I did the interview 2 weeks ago for the New York Times,
which
Dan
we're going to
Brady,
get to. Yeah, we're leading to that.
Brilliant dude, by the way. Asked a lot of great questions. Really took his time. He got a mind around.
Hopefully mine are at the same level.
You're always there, buddy. It really made me rethink all of this. There's no evidence. We have more evidence for our first game in Herkimer than they have for their first game in Springfield. And it was 11 months sooner. We were 11 months sooner, and we have more evidence for that game than they have for their supposed December 1891 game. That said a lot to me, but we still have missing pieces in our research, not only in Herkimer, but also at the Little Falls Historical Society and local historical societies, libraries, college resource rooms. We found gaps of information missing, where we could find documents up till a certain date and then all of a sudden they're gone. We would find pages with corners missing where there were stories that we knew were relative to our research. So I found them in Herkimer and I was thinking, okay, well, they just came to Herkimer and did a hit job after the 56 arguments, right, where it should go.
So somebody intentionally came and
they even say
altered.
that when you read the research papers from Springfield 1956 where they were fighting over where the Hall of Fame should go,
right,
they picked Springfield. But the Springfield committee even said, we're going to send somebody to Herkimer to do more research on this Herkimer story.
Oh, wow.
So they admitted that they were coming
Somebody
to
was
Herkimer.
Here.
And I don't think Lambert, Will, and Baslow were defensive enough to think, oh, we got to secure everything.
Got to protect this, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that was on their mind. I don't think they had. I think it just became an issue, and they thought they could go over there and could straighten it out, and they came back home with nothing.
So you got the little hicks from Herkimer weren't the big city folks from Springfield.
Yeah.
Didn't really realize. Wow. I didn't realize that part of it, that there was something maybe nefarious that was going on. Wow.
Decades.
Decades.
And now here's the thing, Dave. My dad passes away in summer of 2019. I go back to Arizona. COVID hits winter 2020. I come out here in May 2020, Memorial Day or so, and I decide to start doing this. And when I went to disprove the book, the Baslow book, and found that there was a lot more good in there and truth than I thought. My first reaction was to get on the road, and I drove to every major Hall of Fame to see if they're accurate, if the stories were lined up. And I went to Springfield.
Of the different sports or of just basketball, like
different
the New York
sports.
State basketball?
So I drove straight to Springfield.
Okay.
I saw the 13 rules, date change at the front door of the Hall of Fame, and nobody there knew about it or could answer why the date was changed. That was weird. Wow. So I knew something was up in Springfield. Drove straight to Cooperstown, Baseball Hall of Fame. Saw the disclaimer, and I'm like, oh. This isn't a new thing. This happens in history.
Right.
And then I drove to the Field of Dreams in Iowa. And I love that movie, like one of the best movies ever. But when you pull in there, it's a little disappointing. Like right field is all uphill. I don't know how they filmed the game in there. And there's telephone poles through the whole field, just like there was before the game. They just took them out for the movie.
That's a lot of VFX.
And it's out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was interesting. And Football Hall of Fame might be in the wrong city. Like, there's a miscommunication about where it's supposed to be. So, nobody's perfect in sports overall. You know, it's a fluid situation. And so only then did we start to realize, you know, the Herkimer 9 Foundation board members and I just started thinking, you know, let's just find out the truth and set the record straight. Right. You know, it might not be all about Herkimer, but we know there was something happened here. And then we found an article in a newspaper from early 2000s where Naismith's grandson physically threatens the Foste brothers who wrote the book Naismith. And that's when it took a whole nother level. Like when I talked to George and Daryl Foste and heard their story and the things that they went through because of that threat, I knew we were onto something.
Yeah.
So just little nuggets kept driving me. But we'd find a historical document after Baslow's book was out, and there was one misunderstanding in Baslow's book, which caused a lot of miscommunication and misunderstandings of how could this have happened in Herkimer. And once we identified that, the rest of Baslow's book is airtight. I mean, that guy lists everybody he ever met, every game, every score. He remembers the hotel they stayed at in 1907. Wow. I mean, he was a brilliant dude. Organizer, promoter. He had the first team called the Globetrotters. The first Globetrotters team was out of here.
Have you told that story?
It's in our book, yep. And so,
in which one?
Naismith, Basketball Stolen Legacy. And so, Mr. Baslow.
Sorry, they're on the table. I didn't get all the way through.
No, I understand. It's okay. We've gone through a lot of information, but here's a story people, even after they read our book, can't believe sometimes, is Frank J. Baslow had never met Lambert Will. And not until almost when he was publishing his book. And he published it. Lambert Will signed an affidavit to attest to Baslow's facts in his book. And after some time after that, Lambert Will sat down with Frank J. Baslow and said, hey, you know, I'm sorry I didn't bring it up sooner, but, you know, there's actually a mistake in the book. And Frank's like, what? Freaking out, you know?
Yeah.
And Lambert Will lets him know that, you know, there's this thing in the beginning of your book that says I got a pamphlet about basketball from Springfield and I just improved upon it. That's not true. I got a pamphlet from Springfield soliciting a game to be played in the winter to help keep guys in shape during the winter. If you have any ideas, send them into Springfield. That's when I sent in basketball that I invented because I was throwing cabbage in baskets for my mom. So that little misunderstanding there. Well, Frank J. Baslow is a detail guy. He's freaking out. There's a publisher getting ready to publish his book with everything he knows. He reaches out to them. We've recovered that letter that he wrote to the publisher to say, hey, stop the press. There's a mistake. I've got to fix it.
Wow. And
we found the letter back from the publisher to Mr. Baslow that says, nah, it's going to cost too much. Nobody cares. Don't worry about it.
Oh.
So he's upset. Frank J. Baslow had a 4-page press release written in third person to go out to the world through the AP wire to let everybody know that Frank J. Baslow's book had one change need to be made in it. And the publishing company never allowed him to send that out.
Oh, good Lord.
So we got lucky. Brian Carroll found those files in Columbia University's cellar by mistake. So a lot of luck to get as far as we have to have the momentum that we have.
So what drew the attention of, because a lot has happened over these 5 years, you've been in other publications before, but what drew the attention of the New York Times?
That's the best part, Dave. This is so weird. I came back from Phoenix this year. Okay, get back in April or so. And we have our Herkimer 9 Foundation board meeting. And I said, hey, you guys, I met with Jerry Colangelo, the chairman of the Hall of Fame. He's intrigued to find out what really happened. I think he's going to help us work with Springfield Hall of Fame to set the record straight. I said,
just figure it out. Yeah.
And I said, but Jerry said something to me at the end of the meeting that I think we all need to think about. He goes, Scott, I love your vision for your village, your hometown. He said, but unless you prove this Lambert Will story correct, there's no sustainability for your vision on Main Street. It's going to fall apart. That money will be gone. He goes, so I would invest all your time and effort into proving if this is real or not, because if it is, the rest of that stuff's going to fall into place pretty easily. You might even get people in your own town to like you. I'm kidding a little, Dave.
Right, yeah, you're stretching that one just quite a bit.
Did I say village or town? And, and sure enough, I took that to heart. Jerry is a brilliant businessman. I've known him for over 30 years. And I brought that back to Herkimer. I said, hey, guys, let's really focus on just getting this evidence thing done. Because until we do that, even people in our own village don't believe that basketball was invented here yet. So we need to get that across the finish line.
And you do hear that every once in a while. I mean, give me real quick the vision before we get too deep into the weeds here.
Yeah.
What is the vision? I mean, it's not like you're trying to say, Naismith, you're going to have to move that building here and put it here.
Well,
no. That would be breaking news. We'll put a little ticker on there. Yeah.
I mean, now that I have all this time and evidence, Dave, I got to tell you, that's a big ask, to move the Hall of Fame to Herkimer, right, to tear it up out of Springfield. I've had these discussions, because in a worst case scenario, I told Jerry and the Hall of Fame, here's the worst case scenario for both of us. Herkimer and me, I look like an idiot spending 5 years of my life trying to sell this story.
Right. And there's a piece of evidence that says you're full of crap.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so, and then if Springfield's, got problems and Naismith did some of these things we're talking about and stuff like that, what's going to happen there? So a lot of iterations. One of them, I'll just be transparent with you, Dave. I'm transparent with everybody about this because there's no room to hide. This is a 130 plus year old, not conspiracy, but 130-year-old story that needs to be straightened out. So I just mentioned that if Naismith's story is not true, that he did not invent basketball, that he just was the greatest promoter of all time and made it happen. Wouldn't have happened without him. Maybe just take his name off the Hall of Fame. It's called the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. It's the only Hall of Fame with a man's name on it.
With a personal name on it. Yep.
So let's just neutralize. It could be the
Basketball Hall of Fame.
Let's just do that. So I threw that out there. Cringe moment, but it's on the table. And it took it as far as, let's say that you have to move the Hall of Fame to Herkimer because everybody's just so mad. Not me. I'm not telling you have to. Just everybody in the world is like, I'm not going to Springfield until you move it to Herkimer. I know that's not going to happen. But I said, if that's the case, you've got the Hall of Fame in Springfield. That geographic location has absolutely zero connection to the history of basketball, other than the Hall of Fame getting picked to be put there in the 1960s. No game happened there in 1907. No game happened there in 1891. Like, it has nothing to do with the true history of basketball, other than it was donated by the city of Springfield because they didn't have anything to do with it. You know, it's in a rough spot.
Yeah.
And
no, I know that area well. That's where I grew up.
Oh, well, then
Remember I told you that in Ludlow, right next to Springfield. Went to church in Springfield and everything.
Yeah.
I know that spot. Yeah.
And it's an interesting spot.
I don't tell anybody that. Erase that part.
Well, it's just you know, when I went there to see it, I was surprised. You know, it's a beautiful building. They put 30 or 40 million into it.
It is.
So yeah, we've you know, I went down those paths with those folks to let them know that, you know, and one of the questions was what do we do with a $30 million Hall of Fame in Springfield if basketball has moved to Herkimer, you know, by some crazy reason? And I said, well, you guys also invented volleyball 2 years after basketball. It was an alternative to basketball because it was too rough for some people. So the Volleyball Hall of Fame is just up the street. And it's in a strip mall with 2,000 square feet. So give the guy a building, you know, like let's celebrate volleyball.
I don't think
that
the
didn't go
crowds
over
would be.
well. That didn't
I
go
don't
over
think
well
the
either.
crowds would be equal.
So Dave, well, you know, volleyball is huge worldwide. It's surprising, but
sorry, I just can't see.
Yes.
All right. I'm not going to the Volleyball Hall of Fame, no matter what you tell me.
I went because I was on that mission. I had to go see them all.
You had to see them all. That's funny. Do you think it has actually, as this story percolates out, and it really is getting out more and more, because you've been in the Washington Post and stuff like that, right?
That was brutal. Yeah, that was 3 years ago.
Well, but do you think it is impacting them from a financial tourism standpoint, or
no, not yet?
Because
we're not there.
There's no alternative, right? You can't. You can come to Herkimer and like, okay, we're here.
No, even like the reporter from the New York Times, he showed up in Herkimer a day early. Just walked around just to see what he was walking into. So,
and he still talked to you?
Yeah, we still met the next day. That was nice of him to stick around. But we're not there yet, you know. He said to me in our interview, is you don't need everybody to know about this story. You just need to know, the right people need to know about this story right now, and that's where we're at. I'm not, I could just go do TV and radio all day, every day, trying to convince people that we're right, or I could work with Springfield, work with the Hall of Fame, and get this done, where it's more of a collaboration instead of a controversy.
And they're open to that? You're still talking.
They haven't hung up on me yet. And
we could hear.
It's a fascinating conversation. I'm very, Mr. Colangelo, to set up that, because it's been 4 years, just so you know, Dave, when I first started this, I got a chance to meet with the guys in Springfield. I was at their golf tournament out in Phoenix. Jerry has an annual golf tournament for the Hall of Fame. And I ended up sitting next to the senior vice president of the Hall of Fame. And I said, hey, I got a story for you. And he's like, what? And he'd been there 15 years. He'd never heard any of it. So he goes, Scott, I'm sorry. I've been there too long. There's no way. He goes, I'm inviting you to Springfield. Come on out. I'll give you unlimited access to our records. If you find anything that is against our narrative or timeline, I want to see it. And so we went. We had 8 hours in a secure room and got to go through documents. We ended up finding stuff that wasn't good for them. And a few months later, we were told that they would no longer support our efforts in Herkimer regarding Lambert Will. So I knew that door had closed. But that was a couple of years ago.
Right.
And I think Jerry's passion and enthusiasm for basketball over...
If you love the sport, you want to get it right. Right.
And that's when I left Jerry's office. That was the impression I got. Was he was like, "Hey, let's just get this straight. This will be good for everybody to just know what really happened." So I'm hoping that calmness stays the same through this process. But that's my focus now, is getting that across the finish line.
So the New York Times article, they have several different variations of where that can go. How did that play, and when did it come out? It was a couple of weeks now, right?
Last week.
All right.
Yeah, Wednesday or Tuesday or Wednesday. It came out online and then in the paper the next day, and today it's on the International New York Times paper. So that came about by accident. The writer, Dan Barry, got a hold of me on a Friday afternoon a couple weeks ago and just said, hey, I ran across a story and actually it was our interview from the last time I was here with you, and he watched some of that, and he reached out and he goes, give me a call. I just want to know what's going on. And we talked for like an hour. And then he asked me to send him an email with some stuff. And he goes, I don't know if I'm ever going to call you back, but thanks for the time. And
the fact that he stumbled on our interview is, okay.
Right. It says
I'm good with that.
That's why I'm here, Dave. You never know who's listening to what.
You never know. Yeah.
And Herkimer College doesn't have a media team. Herkimer doesn't have any media. The Telegram is, where. So we need to depend on local media. And Dave,
our audience is pretty good size, about 500,000 a year.
Well, but here's the thing for me,
is
as our Herkimer 9 board members keep reminding me, we really need to do a better job here locally of letting people know how much progress we've made. Most people haven't read the book. Most people don't even know the guy's name that invented basketball here. So we're not doing really well there. But again, until we're 100% sure and prove it right, and Springfield even says, hey, Herkimer's got a claim or something like that, my expectations are managed, Dave. I feel bad for the folks in Herkimer because I came in hot and heavy, and I had a lot of faith in this because the evidence was piling up in my head, but I wasn't able to share everything with everybody.
Right.
So I can see how people be like, hey, slow down, dude. You don't even know how to spell Herkimer, no less tell me basketball was invented here. And so I can see why the local county officials and maybe even village officials were hesitant to jump on this story or to get behind it.
Yeah.
And
because initially, just out of the wild blue, it sounds crazy.
I still wake up like, what am I working on today? Are you kidding me? So I get it. So I'm okay with how rough it's been through this process. I didn't expect everybody to just say, Scott must be right, let's go.
Yeah.
I just didn't realize what a humbling experience this would be.
The number of people who said Scott is nuts was a lot higher.
It still is, but
it still is, yeah.
But I told the New York Times reporter too that I said I've been training for this for almost 30 years because my book Math Magic is rewriting how arithmetic should be taught. I think there's a better way than what we're teaching in schools. I invented a new calendar to save us from Y2K. That was 25 years ago. I've been trying to sell that calendar for 25 years. If you want denial experience in your life, listen, just try to sell a 13-month calendar, okay? And so those types of things have prepared me for rejection. And so I don't take this personal. I really, when I took this on, I didn't think, well, I'm doing it, so it must be right. I didn't know. And I'm just grateful we got this far. Like, if the Herkimer 9 folks had given up or said, Scott, you know what, we're 2 years into this, Washington Post just beat the crap out of you. Let's just say we tried. All right. I would have understood. These folks are still standing there, taking the fire, knowing that we're fighting an uphill battle.
How has a New York Times article impacted the Washington Post narrative, and how has it advanced the cause? What's the impact been? I know it's a short period of time to judge that, but
no, it's been amazing, Dave. My phone on Wednesday was blowing up like I'd never seen before, and the New York Times story did not prove that we invented basketball. It just told what's going on in Herkimer. It was a human interest story to say, hey, here's this guy who thinks he might know something that we don't. And here's how he's trying to go about proving it. And here's his experience so far. So it didn't help us with Springfield, probably. They're probably not happy I did that, but it all happened within a day of each other. The New York Times and the Hall of Fame, all of a sudden reaching out to me. So it's quite a fluid situation, but very exciting for us. We have nothing to lose. Those are the worst people to play against because when they have nothing to lose, I mean, they don't, they just have a different mindset.
Yep. And part of what you did to kind of promote the team, or the idea was start the Herkimer Originals. I know we've talked about that before, but I want to lead into that a little bit because you're talking basketball history, and so you went ahead and got an ABA basketball team to just, right?
Yeah, it's Daryl Fosty. That's his fault. We
got to have him on next time he's here.
He's great.
Yeah,
Daryl and George Fosty and Brian and I were in a Zoom call, and Daryl just says randomly, hey, the ABA is still going. And I said, the ABA stopped in 1976 when it was bought by the NBA. He said, no, that somebody bought the license and restarted the league, and there's about 100 teams across the country. And you should get a team, and it could help tell your story. And I said, well, if that's real, I agree with you. So I called Joe Newman, the owner of the ABA, and I said, hey, here's what I'm trying to do. And I was back in Phoenix about a month late after that call, and Joe calls me up, and I'm on the golf course with Alice Cooper. And he goes, Scott, we've awarded your Village Herkimer franchise for the ABA. And he goes, I'll send you the email, but you got to do this, that. And I get off the phone. I go, Coop, I own a semi-pro basketball team for Herkimer. He starts laughing. He goes, he was overshot. And he goes, you got to call them the Herkimer Originals. And I was thinking about it. He hits a shot. He walks over to the scorecard, and he writes the word originals, and he puts the O, making it look like a rim and a net. And he goes, there's your name, and there's your logo. You're welcome. And that's how fast that happened.
Wow.
So, the basketball team, it's been a treat. It's gotten the message out there. We played in the TBT $1 Million Winner Take All last year. We've been in the ABA for 4 seasons, getting ready to start our 5th. And now in a couple weeks, we were in the TBT in Syracuse. And
tell people what that TBT is.
The basketball tournament. $1 Million Winner Take All. Each team puts up $15,000 to get in. Probably costs you another 15 to 20 to put your team together. Expenses, travel, training. It's quite a thing. And there's 64 teams. It's just like March Madness.
Yeah.
Single elimination. We'll be ranked in the dead bottom. Last year we were in it.
Anything can happen.
Anything can happen.
Yeah.
We picked up another good kid today. So last year we got paired up against the UConn alumni team, who had just won the national championship for the second year in a row.
That's a hell of a draw, right?
And we were down 10 at halftime. So, and then their height took over in the second half. Yeah. We just didn't have enough big guys. But so we're going to try it again this year. Our head coach is Dave Golombowski, who is the OG. He was our captain. He was first team All ABA. He's Mr. Hall of Fame at SUNY Poly. Played in Germany for 7 years. Led our team for 3.
He's just a nice guy too.
He is the gentle giant.
Really is,
6'10". And he couldn't scare you. He's just so gentle and nice. So
it scares me a little bit. But
yeah, on the floor, that's different.
Yeah.
But so it's a blessing to have Dave part of the OGs, and helping us put this team together for TBT. And even the New York Times guy, when he looked at that, he goes, "Well, you can't win that." And I said, "Probably not." But that's not the intention. Our intention is to get the story about the Herkimer Originals out there, and that gives us global reach and
marketing.
A lot of national.
It's a marketing expense.
Live on Fox Sports.
Yeah.
So I think it's worth it. And our sponsors have agreed. They keep supporting these efforts. So, and a chance for us to celebrate local great ball players. Josh Gregory has been our captain the last 2 years. Wonderful human from the Mohawk Valley who loves basketball as much as anybody I've ever met. That's all the guy wants to do, is either be playing or teaching basketball. That's his life. He loves it so much. And we're just so grateful to have guys like that as part of the team. So the Originals has turned into a platform not just for the Herkimer 9, but for the Mohawk Valley. It's no different than what Travis has done with the Diamond Dogs.
How has that impacted when the Originals showed up last year at the TBT and you started telling that story to other basketball lovers there, either owners or players or whatever? How was that received?
Yeah, it's fun to watch because first off, the name gets them. Why are you guys the Originals? Original what? So go figure. Alice came up with the perfect name that creates the first question every time. And the TBT loves our story. They've got a lot of alumni teams from amazing programs, Kansas University, all these great places, right? Our story is a little bit different. And we're coming from a village of 7,000 people. We have the smallest fan base in TVT history by a bunch,
They're like, nobody's going to watch this game.
Nobody, So the whole village could show up and we still be outnumbered by the Syracuse people that are going to show up for the Boeheim's army. So,
yeah. Any expectations this year on the TBT different than last year? You're seasoned now. You've got that 1 year experience, right?
Yeah.
Anything you're going to do different to get the word out and help?
Yeah, last year we did a ABA All-Star team. So we hosted the ABA All-Star game last year. So I just went to all the teams and asked for their best players to consider being on our team for the TBT. So it was an all-star ABA team from the East Coast.
Okay.
All right, that was it. The TBT is a couple levels higher. There's G League players, there's ex-NBA players, there's guys that are just great ballers from playgrounds across the country that are trying to win $1 million. You don't want to get in between them and $1 million. So, yeah, there were some very, very good teams, but we learned a lot. So this year we've gone after much higher level caliber players that might not be able to play in our regular season ABA through the winter, November through March that we have. But for summer TVT, it works fine for them, their schedule. So we've drawn some pretty amazing players. We'll be announcing a couple more, but 2 ex-NBA players going to be on the team. So, we'll show up with some more firepower.
Awesome. I did earlier mention the book, that Naismith book, incorrectly. There is an update, though, to it, correct?
Just came out.
Okay.
They changed the cover so you can tell. Dave, when you put out a book called Naismith, Basketball's Stolen Legacy, by brothers who were physically threatened by Naismith's grandson, and you get a story on the Washington Post and some national news and 3 years of marketing, we've gotten a lot of people to reach out to us with facts, with old documents they found in their cellar or their attic. We found more leads. You find a name and a date and something in this newspaper, and it leads you to this newspaper, and it leads you to that person, and then that person opens up this door. So we've had a few years now to develop this story instead of just that first year when we were putting the book together. It was just the 4 of us crunching it out as fast as we could. Who are you going to call?
Yeah.
But now that the book is out and people can sit down and take a couple hours and read it and say, gosh, my grandma used to run the YMCA in Mohawk. Maybe she's got some little records. So luckily, people have been dropping stuff. And the day after the New York Times interview, I was back at the Herkimer Historical Society, and Cassie Castle and her team found another folder of YMCA documents that we had never seen before.
Wow.
And there was several pieces in there that help with the building blocks of showing that Herkimer had a YMCA, that these kids were very aggressive and forward-thinking and trying to figure things out and trying to be a good YMCA, creating a good environment where basketball could have been invented.
What's going to be the silver bullet? Do you think there is one?
Yeah.
What is it going to be?
Yeah. Well, we've got some documents identified that if we could locate them, would probably have words in it that would be the silver bullet. We also have missing documents from Springfield that we would love to see, because that would fill in some gaps and help us understand where Dr. Naismith got his invention of basketball from. Because if you read his autobiography, the first version of the story from Springfield and Naismith was that it was a homework assignment due on December 20th, 1891. And Dr. Naismith came up with it in his sleep that night, woke up and wrote down the rules of basketball, and they played the game that day. That seems far-fetched when you research this and you say, okay, how much work is it to write down 13 rules to invent a new sport? You just waking up with it seems impossible.
Yeah, it does.
The Baslow book, 2 groups of 9 guys beating each other up for 2 months, trying on different uniforms, different balls, different baskets, that sounds like it happened.
Right.
So, and Dave, I don't know how you feel about this, but artificial intelligence is definitely stepping into the world. So we run our evidence.
I use it about every day.
Yeah, we ran
as a researcher.
Yeah, we ran our articles that we found through artificial intelligence and said, hey, this was written by James Naismith and this date. Read this article, and then what's your interpretation based upon how he spoke in this article? Does it sound like he invented basketball? Does it sound like he's trying to claim that he did, or is he not mentioning it at all? It's a whole new level of analysis.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's the New York Times article helped. It gave us some more momentum, but I'm mostly excited about the opportunity to sit with Springfield and set the record straight, because in the end, that's who we need to convince.
Right. How about locally? How do you convince the folks locally? What's the next step?
Springfield. That's, okay. Unless Springfield sends out there needs to be a document out from the Springfield group, the Hall of Fame, Naismith Hall of Fame, with their letterhead that says Herkimer something, contributed, Herkimer, Lambert. That's what's going to take it next. Nobody in Herkimer is going to say, well, Scott just seems more confident now, so we must go with him. That's not going to do it. But I think after these 5 years, 4 years for the Herkimer 9, 5 years for me, we have the opportunity to present our evidence to the powers that be with an open mind that are willing to look at our research now and say, okay, hey, let's figure out what really happened here. In the end, that's really all we could have asked for. I've had this question every day since the New York Times article came out, with board members, with friends, and folks in the know who call me up and say, hey, okay, you got this now, but what are you going for? And, in the end, Dave, we want Lambert Will recognized. We want the Herkimer 9 recognized as the first organized basketball team. Herkimer is the location, first game played. A Lambert Will event center where children can shoot baskets where the first basket was made. Because that ain't happening in Springfield.
Right.
That was 70 years after the fact. So I think that Springfield needs to consider looking at this opportunity to collaborate with the Herkimer 9 Foundation to create a venue and a comparable situation in Cooperstown, and what they do for baseball every summer, we could be doing for basketball year round.
Yeah. No, it makes sense.
So,
and in my mind, a collaborative effort.
Totally.
They're not giving up anything, but they're the sign at the entrance. That's what you.
It's a disclaimer. I don't know how that's going to end. And it'd be great to have a venue in Herkimer where kids can play basketball. Like, I'm not fighting for the Hall of Fame or the museum, because a Hall of Fame doesn't necessarily change the village of Herkimer. It recognizes our position in history, maybe, but I think we need a place where families can come and have a good time. We've got the Herkimer Diamond Mines. We've got the Erie Canal. We've got the West Canada. We're on the Thruway. We've got everything right there to create a place that's even better than Cooperstown because of geography and space.
Cooperstown's out of the way. It really is.
28 miles on Route 28.
I won't forget that now. Well, it's been awesome having you on.
Thanks,
it's great for the update. I'm a backer of this idea. I think it would be fantastic for not just Herkimer, the village of Herkimer, but the surrounding area. Little Falls, where the second game was played.
That's right.
I'm all in on that.
Yeah, it's great.
All right. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll see you next time on Small Town Life.